Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back. Today, we're going to explore one of the most intricately designed, perfectly timed biological systems in existence. Think of it not just as biology, but as a highly efficient, self-regulating factory. This factory operates inside billions of people every single day, governing mood, energy levels, and literally the survival of our entire species. In this explainer, we are decoding the human reproductive factory by mapping out the complex 28-day hormonal communication loop of the menstrual cycle. We'll see exactly how organs and hormones talk to each other to make human life possible. To kick things off, let's lay down a basic foundation. The menstrual cycle is essentially a continuous 28-day loop of physiological changes occurring primarily in the primate female's ovaries and the endometrium, which is just the medical term for the inner lining of the uterus. It's a continuous production cycle that boots up at puberty, known as menarche, and eventually shuts down operations around age 50, which we call menopause. And just for clarity, day 1 of this cycle is always marked by the very first day of bleeding, what's commonly called getting your period. Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We're going to cover the human reproductive factory, the menstrual phase factory reset, the follicular phase buildup, ovulation, the luteal phase preparation, and finally, progesterone and the pregnancy check. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the human reproductive factory. To truly understand this factory, we need to meet the main departments and our cheat sheet of the 4 managers, the hormones. Up in the brain, the anterior pituitary gland acts as the corporate head office. It releases FSH and LH to issue direct orders down to the manufacturing floor, the ovaries. FSH stimulates the follicles, while LH triggers ovulation. In response, the ovaries release estrogen and progesterone to control the receiving department, the uterus. Estrogen's job is to thicken the uterine lining, while progesterone's job is to maintain it. It's just a brilliant top-down communication system. Moving right along to section 2, the menstrual phase, which is essentially our factory reset. Breaking down the timeline, a standard cycle runs for 28 days. Now, any good factory needs to clear out old, unused materials before starting a fresh production run, right? Biology is absolutely no different. The very first phase, the menstrual phase, takes up days 1 through 5. It marks the precise moment the factory recognizes that no pregnancy occurred in the previous month, prompting an immediate reset. So why exactly does this reset happen? Let's look at the cause and effect. A temporary structure from the previous cycle, called the corpus luteum, breaks down. Because it breaks down, the factory's supply of progesterone and estrogen completely plummets. Without those stabilizing hormones, the uterine lining, the endometrium, just can't hold itself together anymore, so it breaks down and is released. This physical shedding is what causes the cramping and bleeding experienced during a period. But here is the genius part of it all. That exact same drop in hormones acts as an alarm bell for the brain. It removes the brakes on the pituitary gland, giving it the total green light to start pumping out FSH and LH for a brand new cycle. And that green light brings us to section 3, the follicular phase, where we start building things back up. Now that the factory is totally clean, it's time to start gathering raw materials. Running roughly from day 6 to day 13, this phase showcases the ultimate multitasking of the human body. Seriously, 2 things are happening at the exact same time. Up top, FSH, that's follicle-stimulating hormone, tells the ovaries to start developing 15 to 20 primary follicles. But only one of these will become the dominant, mature Graafian follicle, essentially the chosen egg sac. As this chosen follicle grows, its cells pump out increasing amounts of estrogen. That estrogen travels down to the uterus and acts like a hyperactive construction crew, rapidly rebuilding and thickening the endometrial wall. So the factory is building the product in the ovary while simultaneously prepping the shipping box in the uterus. On top of that, as estrogen levels get higher and higher, they create this positive feedback loop, basically yelling up to the brain, get ready, the product is almost finished. Which brings us to the absolutely most critical number on our chronological timeline, 14, day 14. In our factory analogy, day 14 is shipping day, because this is the day the product is released. The window surrounding it, specifically between days 9 and 16, marks the absolute maximum fertile window for a female. If someone is trying to conceive, this specific window is exactly what they're tracking. And that leads us perfectly into section 4, ovulation, the main event. Everything the factory has done for the past 2 weeks has been leading up to a precise domino effect that triggers ovulation. Step 1, those rising estrogen levels we just talked about hit their absolute peak. Step 2. This peak sends a massive positive feedback signal straight to the pituitary gland. Step 3. The pituitary responds by releasing a sudden massive surge of LH, luteinizing hormone. Step 4. This LH surge acts like a biochemical key that forces the mature Graafian follicle to instantly rupture open. And finally, step 5. The secondary oocyte, the egg itself, is released from the ovary. The product has officially left the manufacturing floor. With the product shipped, we enter section 5. The luteal phase, also known as the preparation.
Instantly, the factory changes tactics, shifting all its resources right into quality control and preparation. Let's contrast these two halves of the cycle to really see the shift in strategy. In the first half, the follicular phase, the focus was entirely on building up. Estrogen was the star manager, thickening the walls and maturing the follicle. But now, in the luteal phase, running from day 15 to 28, the focus is strictly on maintenance and nutrition. Progesterone takes over as the new boss, stabilizing that uterine lining and actually triggering the release of a glycogen-rich nutrient fluid, essentially a biological milk to ensure the environment is perfectly hospitable.
How exactly does this happen? Well, remember that ruptured follicle left behind after ovulation? Under the influence of LH, it transforms into a temporary glandular structure called the corpus luteum. And here is a totally wild biological fact. The corpus luteum is a brand new, highly active endocrine gland that the body literally builds from scratch in just a few days. This powerhouse immediately starts secreting massive amounts of progesterone. This progesterone transforms the uterine wall, making it highly glandular, so it secretes that biological milk to feed a potential embryo before a placenta can even form. And crucially, this high level of progesterone sends a negative feedback signal back to the brain saying, halt, stop making FSH and LH, put all new production on hold because we might have a pregnancy to deal with. Which brings us to our final act, Section 6, Progesterone and the Pregnancy Check. We're nearing the end of the 28 days, and the factory is in a holding pattern. But what happens if the egg isn't fertilized? What if there is no embryo to implant? This is the critical question that determines how the whole cycle resolves. If there is no embryo, the negative feedback loop just quietly takes over. Without a pregnancy signal, those LH levels from the pituitary eventually wind down and drop off. And without LH to maintain it, that powerhouse corpus luteum begins to regress and die off, shrinking into a tiny white scar called the corpus albicans. Because the corpus luteum dies, the factory supply of progesterone and estrogen completely dries up. This sudden withdrawal of hormones is exactly what can sometimes impact a person's energy and mood. But physiologically, as we learned at the very beginning, this sudden lack of progesterone causes the thickened uterine wall to collapse. The endometrial lining sheds, bleeding begins, and the factory inevitably restarts at day 1. But wait, what if fertilization does occur? Well, then we have a completely different story. Progesterone is the absolute key to maintaining a pregnancy. If an embryo implants, it releases hormones that keep the corpus luteum alive. Because it stays alive, progesterone levels remain high. This sustained elevated level of progesterone is exactly what early blood tests and doctors are looking for to confirm a viable pregnancy. Because progesterone remains high, the uterine wall stays thick, healthy, and glandular. The factory reset is officially canceled, and the cycle is halted to sustain the new life. And that brings us to the end of our journey. Seriously, how incredible is this biological factory? It perfectly calibrates 4 unique hormones, coordinates communication between the brain and 2 distant organs, and executes a flawless 28-day chronological timeline, all to create the absolute foundation of human life. The sheer precision of the feedback loops, the way building phases perfectly transition into maintenance phases, and the undeniable power of progesterone, it truly makes you marvel at the complexity of biology happening inside us, completely on autopilot. So what does this all mean for you? Well, the next time you think about the menstrual cycle, I hope you see it for the incredible biological explainer we just uncovered. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.